classify it, Billy?
Well, it's a super predator. Suchomimus. Snout.
No, think bigger.
Baryonyx.
Up with that sail. Spinosaurus aegypticus.
I don't remember that on InGen's list.
It's because it wasn't on their list, and that makes you wonder what else they were up to.
So I was going through some old documents and files the other day, and I discovered all this stuff I filmed of myself creating the InGen list for the Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom viral marketing website, thedinosaurprotectiongroup.com, and I forgot that I actually filmed all this, creating the infamous InGen list. Now, for those of you that don't know, InGen's list is something that the character Alan Grant and Billy Brennan talk about in Jurassic Park 3 when they're identifying the Spinosaurus. And their words of, that wasn't on InGen's list was a real sticking point for fans for a number of years, speculating about, well, what does that mean? Why wasn't the Spinosaurus on the list? And was this list publicly available? Because Billy's obviously seen it and Alan has. So that was something that when we came to do the viral marketing for Fallen Kingdom, Universal and the filmmakers graciously allowed us to unearth InGen's dirty secrets. And one of the things we wanted to show fans finally after so many years was the infamous InGen list. Now, this was something I created myself. I did some research watching the movies and reading the original books. Even though the books aren't canon, it was just something that I wanted to do research on, how they presented their creatures and how they talked about their DNA samples and all that sort of stuff. And then I cobbled together this physical list, which you can see I have in my hands right here. Now obviously this one I'm holding here has like coffee stains and other things in it that aren't present in the officially released one. So this here is the one I printed and scanned into the computer, and then using Photoshop I aged it differently and tweaked it and made it look more like it was actually scanned pages from the 90s. So the version that you're actually going to see here, which I'm physically holding, looks different in some capacity and has other information that is not present on the officially released version that appeared on the website. So I don't want to spend all day going through every single nitty-gritty detail here, but I'll just give you some basic overviews in some things that I think fans might find interesting. So this is an asset catalogue that was pulled together in December 7th, 1996. So after Hurricane Clarissa had hit Site B and they'd evacuated the island, and before the events of the Lost World Jurassic Park, when they went to go find hunt the dinosaurs for the San Diego park. Right off the bat, the Easter egg at the front here, it says 1.3 species profiles are missing and lost on Site B, and that is because that's obviously a nod to the set of species profiles that Roland Tembo has on him when he's trying to identify the dinosaurs that they're capturing, and he slings the documents onto the floor on Site B somewhere, and they're missing. Now obviously I'm not saying that they only had one catalogue, they obviously had more than one, and we see several characters holding different species profiles in the scene in the Lost World, but I like to think that the specific ones that Roland had and threw away were part of this set of documents. And so yes, so the amount of document pages that we actually released on the DPG contained here 1.1, 1.2, 2.1, and then 5.1 and 5.2, which are crossed out at the bottom here. So I like to imagine that these pages that I'm holding are the ones that were publicly released to some capacity, whether leaked online or whatever, and these are the ones that Alan Grant and Billy Brennan saw. And this was all in aid of, like I said, unearthing InGen secrets to make people more sympathetic to how mistreated the dinosaurs were, because obviously we were playing the role of the dinosaur activists for the Dinosaur Protection Group, and so we were honoured by being given the chance to really dive into some of the details of the canon and the lore that otherwise weren't previously known, and I tried my best to stick to what was known and expand upon it in a really interesting way. So the first page we go to are active dinosaurs on Nublar, and we have all the dinosaurs that are there. The interesting things that are mentioned here are that InGen has noted that the lysine contingency actually failed, and it's pending further investigation. So as Hammond says in The Lost World to Ian, that he wants his team to work out why the dinosaurs are breeding, how they're flourishing, and then it also notes that they've taken note of the velociraptors that have been breeding, which I like to imagine was because Grant gave his testimony to InGen after the incident of what happened, and he mentioned that the dinosaurs were breeding, and obviously they're saying that they knew that they were flourishing on Site B, so it all just ties that together. So we've got here that one Brachiosaurus died due to malnutrition. The Triceratops is the interesting one here, actually. It says one lame Triceratops died during the incident of Jurassic Park. Tyrannosaur bite marks were found on the cadaver during the 1994 cleanup. So that's a nod to the sick Triceratops in Jurassic Park. Because I was thinking about that dinosaur was sick while the park fell and all the paddocks were opened, and there's a Tyrannosaur walking around, and this thing is feeling sick, so it was very vulnerable. But it also, the idea of a T-Rex fighting a Triceratops could also be a nod to Jurassic Park the game, which not necessarily I'm saying that's canon, but there is a T-Rex Triceratops fight in that game, so it was kind of left open. It could go either way, but I will admit when I was writing this, the sick Triceratops from Jurassic Park was the thing I had in mind. So then the Velociraptors, the interesting thing about the raptors here is it says previous population count 3, current population count unknown, and the notes say no reported sightings of active animals. So keep in mind this is from the October 5th 1994, so all these numbers and information come from their 1994 cleanup, and it says here that no reported sightings of active animals. Pending update, young raptor carcasses discovered on Nublar during 1994 cleanup. Initial raptor population had successfully changed sex from female to male and had begun breeding. Genetic anomaly is currently under investigation at frog DNA. So the fact that they've written the population count is unknown, that for me was if they ever wanted to add more raptors on Nublar post Jurassic Park between back in the early 90s and mid 90s. Like they are suggesting now with Jurassic Park Survivor, the upcoming game, that they do have wiggle room to add more raptors on the island, because they were breeding, as we saw the nests in the first film. Obviously those nests had hatched pretty recently to when Grant, Lex and Tim found them, because the footprints were in the dirt and sand still. They hadn't been moved or disturbed. So they must have hatched pretty recently, but we don't know how long the raptors had actually been breeding for. So there could be others out there just hiding, and that's another nod to the first book as well, because in the first book the raptors had been breeding and they had nests all over the place and were getting off the island and doing all sorts, unbeknownst to the InGen staff. And then I added Compsognathus because I like the idea of those little green menaces travelling from island to island, from Nublar to Sauna and back again. So it said previous population count 0, current population count 28. And that was also because I saw this promotional photo, and I can't remember what it was promoting. It might have been Jurassic Park The Ride, but it was from the set of the main road attack sequence from Jurassic Park with the tour cars, and I think Spielberg's in it. And he stood there with compies, and I just really like that. I always like the idea of compies being on Nublar in the early days. Obviously they're in the book as well, so yeah. And I mentioned here that they eat dinosaur excrement, so that's also another nod to the book, because in the book they mention that the Compsognathus help clean up the dinosaur dung. And now we go to active dinosaurs on Sauna, and so it says here that the previous population estimates, so population counts come from 1993, so they haven't done a asset check since the 1993, and then the hurricane hit, and then they haven't been back. So obviously Ludlow's plans are to rejuvenate Site B, San Diego, whereas Hammond wants to know how they're flourishing and stuff. So this is all under the idea, because this is all when Hammond was still in charge from 1996, as I mentioned. Hammond is still in charge, and he wants to know what's going on with the populations. How are they flourishing? So obviously their numbers are all here for the dinosaurs, but their current population counts are all unknown because, like I said, it's pending. But interesting on this page, I think, for fans to note is like the Edmontosaurus has 4 because there's an Edmontosaurus skull seen in the T-Rex nest, if I'm correct, in the Lost World. And Microceratus, I believe, is a mistake on my part because I believe it was called Microceratops. I might be wrong there. But that name change didn't happen until many years after this is meant to be set in real life. So you just have to chalk it off as the fictional Jurassic Park universe getting things sooner than we did. And then on this page, the interesting part is like the Tyrannosaurus Rex has a population count of 6. Now obviously the other Tyrannosaur that went to Nublar makes the count 7, and we revealed on the Dinosaur Protection Group website and Dino Tracker that the T-Rex was originally shipped from Site B to Nublar. So the 7 rulers of Site B, as they're otherwise known in the fandom, that's a huge nod back to Trespasser, where they talked about 7 T-Rexes being on the island. And that, again, not to say that Trespasser is canon, but it's more to just have a fun nod and a wink to that game, while also cherry picking a really cool detail from that game. I mean, can you imagine 7 T-Rexes wandering about on an island? That's like crazy to think about, and they breed. Carnotaurus 2, that's obviously a nod to the 2 Carnotauruses in the novel by Crichton. And then Baryonyx 5. I like to think the Baryonyx that we see in Fallen Kingdom, the one that attacks Claire and Franklin in the bunker, is one of these ones from Sauna, like an old clone. And also the Baryonyx that we put at the Beckles Lido that I put there. I like to think that was one of the old Site B clones. And then we get into the inactive dinosaurs and DNA samples. Now this page here, talks about how they've got a certain number of samples that they can draw from, and we like to think that the dinosaurs that are all listed here all have their species profile. So that's why you'll have things like the Corymphosaurus as being inactive, yet they have a profile that we see in the Lost World. One of the characters is holding profile listed as Corymphosaurus, so I think it's spelt wrong, but it's meant to be Corymphosaurus. But we do have, not to jump too far ahead, but right on the last page we do have a little note here that says see species profile 1.3 for further information on all active/inactive dinosaurs listed in the asset catalogue. So the idea here is that even though they don't have the right amount of DNA to clone these fully, some of them they actually did until, as we see later on in the document, there was the sabotaging of the first park and a pipe bursting from an outside, the outside artificial lake, caused flooding and damage and all that sort of stuff. So they actually lost a lot of assets before they went back in 1994. So, like, for example, one of the big ones right at the back here, the Proceratosaurus was actually, it was inactive, but its current status is terminated because they lost everything due to, viable embryos were destroyed by sabotage of cold storage units and extensive water damage and all that sort of stuff. So they don't know what they've got until they've cloned it, basically. And when they can kind of get a rough estimate of what they've got, they write it down and they have a species profile list for it. So that's again why the Corymphosaurus, as one of the sticking points, I know many fans are wondering about that. The Corymphosaurus, they mention in an old Lost World script how they cloned an early version of the Corymphosaurus and they all died, but they knew that's what it was, the species. They managed to identify it. So every dinosaur in here, like Metriacanthosaurus, Herrerasaurus, everything, they all have a species profile. So yeah. Anyway, so Suchomimus is here, which again is another mistake on my part because Suchomimus wasn't named or discovered until the year after this is meant to be set, this document, because it was 1996, and I think the Suchomimus was discovered in 1998, or 1997. Allosaurus, Metriacanthosaurus, Herrerasaurus, Stegosaurus. They're all mentioned on the Jurassic Park map as future attractions. Apatosaurus, which I believe there are bones seen of those in the Lost World. Pachyrhinosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Euphocephalus. And then, so that part of the InGen list was released via the information about the illegal cloning in 1999. And then this section of it was released for the old investigation into the old park. So when the DPG was talking about what happened in 1993, we went deep into what happened there. And there's there's like nods back to Jurassic Park the game here, where it mentions that someone, the park veterinarian Jerry Harding, disclosed information in personal reports suggesting that embryos were stolen in an effort to sell to competing companies. So like he was suspicious of Nedry. And you've got other nods of like how the embryo storage units were destroyed from flooding, from burst pipes, and foundations were destroyed and all that sort of stuff due to minor tectonic activity being suggested. So that's a nod to, Mount Sibo, sort of underground activity from the volcanoes. So there was early signs of it becoming active again in the 90s and causing damage to the embryos and the assets that InGen were holding there. And then when we go into the assets, which are all blue actually, because I think my printer ran out of ink when I was doing it. But like I said, I edited these online, so I turned them to be black text. But they mention how things like where is it? The the Apatosaurus here, which is actually the Corymphosaurus section. So this changed from Apatosaurus to Corymphosaurus in post-production. But it says like the viable embryos destroyed by sabotage of cold storage units and water damage. Despite the loss of valuable material, current DNA samples were retrieved during the evacuation of Site B. So they managed to rescue 57%, 57% of the DNA that they needed to clone this animal from Site B. They lost the rest during the park being destroyed, and so thus it was basically all to allude to that it was just a complete mess what was going on between those years. Like they didn't have a good stronghold on their assets, and so things were being lost, things were being destroyed, and it wasn't good. And then other interesting things I think in this section are the Herrerasaurus, again mentioned here. It said previously active on Nublar. 4 individuals were alive prior to the sabotage of park systems, but all were found dead during the 1994 cleanup. And so again, they lost a lot of their DNA, taking it back down to 60. So that is obviously a nod to Jurassic Park the game, because there was 4 Herrerasauruses in Jurassic Park the game that I believe die when you play the roller coaster level, the Bone Shaker or whatever it's called. But yeah, the the idea here is that, again, not that Jurassic Park the game is actually officially canon or whatever, but it's like I cherry picked something I thought was cool, and I liked the Herrerasaurus, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have that in there to some capacity. Now I don't know obviously whether Universal and other companies who work on Jurassic properties are using this list in any capacity to help the world building going forward. I don't know. I know this list appeared in some concept art for Jurassic World Chaos Theory, the new Netflix series. So it is, I guess, floating around internally to some capacity. So I don't know if in Jurassic Park Survivor, if they are going to harken back to the Herrerasaurus being there. It'd be kind of cool if they did, but I don't know. Like the Metriacanthosaurus I've written inactive, so if they have the Metriacanthosaurus in Jurassic Park Survivor, that will go against this list. That wouldn't make me too sad as long as the game's good. But it would be really cool if they stuck to what I wrote. More cohesive canon, And this last page we have here, I hope I'm aiming this at the camera okay. I've mentioned the Proceratosaurus, how they basically lost everything and it went back into extinction, which I think is mentioned on the DPG website. Yes, so this whole section here in the final version completely changed, and it actually references Operation Cleanup or clean sweep being cancelled, which is a nod, two nods actually, to the old Lost World viral marketing website, which talked about the Operation Clean Sweep of going into Nublar and, you know, destroying organic materials, you know, taking the dinosaurs out, and obviously the deleted scene from the Lost World where Ludlow talks about how they were, you know, removing organic material from Nublar.
2.3 million. Demolition, deconstruction and disposal of island Nublar facilities, organic and inorganic, $126 million.
And obviously with the Tyrannosaur still being alive and other dinosaurs being alive, when we get to Jurassic World and stuff that have survived, you know, one just assumes, well, maybe that was cancelled, so we put that into the list, and saying that, you know, they were going to go do that, but then they abandoned it. But anyway, but in the original version, which I'm holding here, it was going to be Troodon. It was going to have this bit that was cut out and restuck back in, the idea being that they, you know, as it says here, the regrowth of this animal is strictly prohibited. So this was a huge Easter egg back to Jurassic Park the game, where the Troodon in that game was such a menace and such a horrible dinosaur that the geneticist, Dr. Sorkin, was tasked by Hammond to destroy that dinosaur. So that one was like, no, too bad, got to get rid of it, it's too dangerous, all that sort of stuff. And I believe they released a journal for Jurassic Park the game, where you know, Dr. Sorkin's journal, where she talked about all that sort of stuff, and it mentioned that the Tylosaurus was you know, not mentioned anywhere on any lists, so we didn't add that in here. And the Troodon was to be removed from all lists and destroyed. So I wanted to put a nod to that in the InGen list, but obviously at some point I believe I was like, I think this is too much, and this is going to really overly confuse fans as to if Jurassic Park the game's canon, because that's such a specific nod. So I was like, you know what, I'll just remove the Troodon from it completely in the final version, and that still stays in line with what's written in Dr. Zoran's journal, because like I said, they removed everything. But yeah, that was originally going to be a nod to that, because the idea was that the DPG were going to be talking about how the Troodon has been targeted, and it's a species that's been you know, mistreated and you know, made extinct on purpose, whereas the Proceratosaurus was made extinct by accident. The Troodon was made extinct on purpose. But yeah, so anyway, so I don't know what else I can say about this really at this time, but I just hope that you guys have enjoyed me talking about the InGen list I made for the Dinosaur Protection Group website, and it's mainly to, you know, help people who may be younger and new to the Jurassic franchise to kind of get a better grasp on the 14 years between Jurassic Park 3 and Jurassic World, or should I say Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, because that's when this came out. There was so much speculation about the history of the Spinosaurus, why wasn't it on InGen's list, and so we released those reports on the Dinosaur Protection Group websites to discuss how they were illegally cloned at a time when cloning was banned after the San Diego incident, and it gave us an opportunity to release the list that fans had been asking for ages. Now, like I said, I'm not expecting this list to be adhered to strictly going forward with the Jurassic IP. I'd be very surprised if they did. But like I said, it was seen in Jurassic World Chaos Theory concept art, so yeah, it is out there in some capacity within Universal. So it'd be cool to see if they you know, reference this at all in like things like Jurassic Park Survivor, but we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys, and subscribe and like and all that jazz. Yeah, happy Jurassic June, everyone. Bye.